LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the September 11th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out the dozen best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. As you can see from the title of the video, my main topic is, will Donald Trump destroy the Republican Party? And that was discussed in most of the Sunday shows yesterday, at least to some extent, because, basically the next 6 months are going to decide whether Trump is going to be the Republican presidential candidate for the 2024 election. And if that does end up being the case, it could very well be the end of the Republican Party. I mean, never mind if he loses and then tries to run again in 2028. I saw someone talking about that over the weekend on Twitter or something. That would even be worse for the Republican Party. I mean, all parties, or I guess both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have had a lot of fall off in party identification. There are a lot more independents these days anyway, so uh, just because I'm talking about the destruction of the Republican Party doesn't mean the Democratic Party isn't far behind or whatever, but at least they have a party where their policies are based, on facts and reality, and not like a personality cult that pretends all sorts of things never happened that happened. And well, I'll get into that when I get to the newsmaker clips and the news summaries, and I'll show you all 5 corporate news outlet news summaries. They'll be talking about Biden's trip to Vietnam, and I think his press conference in Hanoi, and there's some just reporting on the big earthquake in Morocco and on what's happening with the major U.S. political parties. So I'll go through that with you, and then I'll show you a bunch of Republicans, 2 governors that are, or I'm sorry, one governor who is a non-Trump supporter in the Republican Party, Chris Sununu, one senator, Bill Cassidy, who is also not a Trump supporter. Then I'll show you Nikki Haley and Glenn Youngkin also sort of talking about the topic. And then I'll end with Vice President Kamala Harris talking about some of the problems with her and the Democratic Party, and whether she's taking the threat of a second Trump presidency seriously. That'll be clip 12. By the way, down in the video description, you can read short summaries of all 12 clips I'm going to show you, including the first one, which is kind of my political comedy. The thing that CNN State of the Union gets to do that none of the other news programs do is that it is broadcast live at 6 a.m. Pacific time, 9 a.m. Eastern time, and then it's rebroadcast 3 hours later. But if, they're really good journalists and really want to put the time in, they redo the news summary to show the breaking news in those 3 hours. And when I get to the news summaries, I'll show you that CNN with Jake Tapper actually did that. But in the middle, he was sitting there waiting for the Biden news conference in Hanoi. And I mean, talk about this is breathless coverage. That's why I picked it as my political comedy clip. I think Jake Tapper kind of goes overboard, but if you watch while he's talking, there's I think he almost thinks he's making a joke, sort of over hyping the breaking news aspect, and we're all waiting with bated breath. I believe he actually uses the phrase bated breath for Biden's news conference in Hanoi. Really? Were we really waiting with, was there anyone anywhere who was actually waiting with bated breath? I don't really think so, but you can let me know what you think after we watch that clip together over here.
Welcome back to this special elongated version of State of the Union. If you're tuning in to watch Fareed Zakaria, we will bring that to you as as we can. But right now, the world is on edge as we await President Biden to speak. He is in Hanoi, Vietnam, and we have been waiting for some time for him to come out and take questions from reporters in a press conference that was originally scheduled for an hour and a half ago. But we are still waiting with bated breath for President Biden to talk about his trip. Let me bring in the panel to discuss some of the things that we are expecting to hear from him. Beth Sanner, what do you think?
So I don't know what you think, if that was like a little bit overwrought, the waiting with bated breath. I don't know. I guess it's not my best political comedy clip ever, but I found it kind of amusing. And like I said, I'm going to show you two more CNN State of the Union news summaries from both before and after that breathlessly awaited Biden news conference. But first, I'm going to show the news summaries from longest to shortest. And the longest one was Fox News Sunday, where they spent a bunch of time first talking about the earthquake in Morocco. I think the death toll is up to like over 2,000 people, so I don't want to minimize the news impact, but I wonder if like the earthquake had happened a few days earlier, if it would have gotten so much coverage on the Sunday shows. I mean, it's kind of faded from the news. I mean, there's a little bit. It's those first 48 to 72 hours when they might actually rescue people. I guess it's almost reminiscent of September 11th. This is the September 11th edition, where they spent days trying to find people and collapse buildings, and that's kind of what happened in Morocco. But as I've said before, there's a bias. It's not a partisan political bias, but all the corporate news media has a bias for disasters that create video footage that they can show of, you know, destroyed buildings or fires or floods, or or if it bleeds, it leads kind of bias. And I think you see that in the beginning of this Fox News Sunday clip. And then they go into what they had prepared to do, the state of education. It's really all about trying to play up this Republican talking point that they're pro-parent and the Democrats want to take the kids away from the parents. I see this like all day, every day on Fox News. And as you know, Fox News, of the big five corporate outlets, Fox News is the one that isn't actually a journalistic news organization. It's a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party that, Roger Ailes actually created it to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party, as you can see by reading, this book right over here, The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman. And we all know that Fox News has well-documented bias. I've made hundreds of Fox News bias videos over the years to prove it, but here you can see them trying to talk up this parents should be in control, but then they focus on these transgender issues and show a poll that says that people think we spend too much time talking about transgender issues in school and we should talk about reading and writing and arithmetic, but that's not what they're talking about in terms of the education crisis. It's all about parental rights and transgender education. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. We begin with some breaking news. Rescue crews are struggling to get through the roads and rubble to search for survivors after a massive earthquake hit Morocco this weekend, killing more than 2,000 people and injuring over 2,000 more. The quake causing major damage in the city of Marrakesh. This is just some of the aftermath. It is the biggest quake to hit the North African country in decades. Fox News foreign correspondent Trey Yingst joins us live from Casablanca. Hello, Trey.
Shannon, good morning. More than 2,000 people are dead, many still missing after a massive 6.8 magnitude earthquake rocked Morocco on Friday evening. Overnight, rescue workers continuing their tedious efforts to find survivors under the rubble. The Moroccan government has deployed specialized military units to the epicenter of this quake that sits just to the southwest of the city of Marrakesh. We do know those soldiers won't just be digging through debris. They're also setting up field hospitals and housing for the now thousands of internally displaced Moroccans. To give you a sense of the terrain around this area, the bulk of the destruction is near the base or within the high Atlas Mountains, so rescue workers will need time to get to some of these more remote villages. Earthquakes are rare in Morocco, and this was the largest tremor to hit inside the country in 120 years. The initial shaking was felt all the way in Portugal, and it was followed by a number of aftershocks. More funerals were held today for the victims in this disaster, as King Mohammed VI has declared a 3-day period of mourning. Now, we are still in this critical 48-hour period following the earthquake in southern Morocco. With each passing hour, the probability that people are pulled out alive decreases. Back to you.
Trey Yingst reporting from Morocco. Thank you so much. And we're going to continue to monitor that developing story. But we turn now to the state of education here in the U.S. There is a debate in this country about the role that schools should play in American life. What say should parents have about what their children are learning? How much information should educators be required to give parents about their children's experiences behind classroom doors? Those are some of the questions we'll attempt to answer today. But first, Mike Emanuel reports from the Virginia suburbs just outside Washington, D.C., which has become ground zero in the fight over schools.
Moms and dads who during the pandemic were alarmed by COVID restrictions and what they felt like was a political agenda in their schools. In Virginia, Glenn Youngkin recognized the heartburn and ran for governor in 2021 on empowering parents, becoming the first Republican to win statewide in what had become Blue Virginia since 2009, creating a new political playbook for other Republicans to follow in swing states or where Democrats are dominant. Youngkin imposed new policies insisting students use bathrooms and locker rooms matching their birth gender and increasing parental notification requirements.
Parents should be the absolute primary advisor. To close them out of this doesn't make any sense.
But in several districts in the blue Northern Virginia suburbs, Fairfax County, Prince William County, Arlington, and Alexandria, Youngkin has encountered some resistance.
We're worried that their names, pronouns, and in fact their very identity will no longer be honored at school.
A recent Fox poll reveals more than half believe there isn't enough focus on reading, writing, math, and science, while close to half believe there's too much focus on sexual orientation and gender identity. Fairfax County schools are defying the state's transgender policies. The superintendent argues the local gender policies comply with federal and state anti-discrimination laws. This showdown could end up in court. Shannon?
Mike Emanuel reporting from Virginia. Mike, thank you very much. Joining us now here in Washington, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. Welcome back to Fox.
And I think that second half of the news summary had this other bias I talked about all the corporate news media having, where they bend their news coverage to favor their exclusive guest. They have like an exclusive guest on the program. They'll spend much more time reporting on news about that guest than they would if they didn't have that guest. And I think because they had Glenn Youngkin on, that is why Fox News spent all that time on the education fight in Virginia, which, if they're saying it's, they want reading, writing, and arithmetic, but they're really focusing on like parental rights and notification and transgender issues and not the things that people really care about in terms of education, mostly, I guess, and except for the Fox News base, I guess. But anyway, you'll see that same bias, by the way, in the CBS News Face the Nation news summary that I'll show a little later, where they talk a lot about Vice President Kamala Harris because they have an exclusive interview with Kamala Harris. But that is the fourth of the news summaries, and I want to get to the second news summary, NBC News Meet the Press. As I saw in the live comments, it was a Grumpy Cat mentioning that this yesterday was Chuck Todd's last day as host of Meet the Press. It's going to be Kristen Welker starting next Sunday. He talked about that at the beginning of the news summary, as you'll see. He talked about it at the end of the program and even sort of like handed over the baton to Kristen Welker. And I don't know, I can't resist saying it, but The very last thing Chuck Todd said as host of NBC News' Meet the Press was, no matter who sits in this chair, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. So the last thing he did say was a lie, because, Meet the Press does get preempted on multiple Sundays a year, as I'm always pointing out. But somehow I think I'll get to keep pointing that out with Kristen Welker. She's not going to give up the motto of Meet the Press, is she? Well, maybe if she wants to stop lying with the motto of the program, but I'm getting off on my lying Meet the Press motto tangent that I know everybody hates, so I'll get back to the news summary. This is Chuck Todd first talking about it being his final program, and then talking about the future of both of the political parties, both the Republicans and the Democrats having problems, especially some bad poll numbers, right? Isn't this bad poll numbers for President Biden? And oh no, will be the next one, ABC. But there are bad poll numbers for President Biden. But I'll talk about that after the next news summary. Here's Chuck Todd saying goodbye and giving us the news over here.
Good Sunday morning. As you may have heard, after 9 years and more than 430 broadcasts, today is my final Sunday in the moderator chair. To say that this has been the honor and privilege of my lifetime is an understatement. This is simply the pinnacle of political journalism, and something my younger self never imagined. No matter how much of a grind the current political climate is, wearing me down on any given day, I still always have had a pinch me, I can't believe it feeling every time I hear my name introduced as the moderator of the longest running show in the history of television. In fact, I used to joke, my goal is not to be the last moderator of the longest running show in American history. And I've achieved that goal and then some. I look forward to passing the baton in about 57 minutes. But in the meantime, we've put together a terrific program with a focus, or at least we're going to try to, on the future of both political parties. And the guests we have today, California Governor Gavin Newsom and Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, are two I specifically wanted for my last show because I think these two elected officials have a healthy respect for you, the viewers and the voters. They aren't afraid of answering any question, on any platform, on any network, by any person. They accept the premise of a healthy democracy, which is that elected officials take a stand and then come on shows where they get questioned for their rationales and defend it. I'm a skeptic by nature, which also makes me inquisitive by nature. And it's in that spirit that I think Meet the Press is the standard bearer when it comes to educating viewers and asking the relevant questions that you want asked. So as I prepare to sign off, it's interesting that both parties find themselves at a crossroads. Many leaders in both parties desperately want to start looking towards the future. But as you know, both parties are stuck in the present, and the voters are exhausted by it. For the Republicans, the issue is Trump and Trumpism. Does it belong in the past? Well, at an event on Friday night in South Dakota where he was endorsed by Governor Kristi Noem, Trump made it clear he does not intend to leave it there.
If I win and somebody wants to run against me, I call my attorney general. I say, listen, indict him. Well, he hasn't done anything wrong that we know of. I don't know. Indict him on income tax evasion. You'll figure it out. The Republicans in the Senate and the Republicans in the House cannot let this go on.
For the Democrats, the issue, of course, is Biden's age. In a CNN poll this week, nearly 7 in 10 Democrats said the party should nominate, quote, a different candidate than Joe Biden. And it was the biggest concern among 49% of all Democrats. The biggest concern was Biden's age. Overall, just 28% of Americans say Biden inspires confidence. That's down 24 points from 2 years ago when he was just 4 months into his presidency. This week, the Biden campaign released an ad highlighting his surprise visit to Ukraine in February, a not-so-subtle argument that he is physically up to the job.
A nearly 40-hour journey in and out of Ukraine.
President Biden left Washington, D.C. at 4 a.m. on Sunday. He landed in eastern Poland and then took a 9.5-hour train to Kyiv.
In the middle of a war zone, Joe Biden showed the world what America is made of. That's the quiet strength of a true leader.
Well, joining me now is Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana.
And I will show you Chuck Todd's excerpt or a clip from Chuck Todd's interview with Bill Cassidy where Chuck Todd goes out without getting him to answer a question he's asked him over and over again over many broadcasts about, like, if Trump's the Republican nominee, are you going to vote for him? And That will be actually clip 8 coming up fairly soon. But I guess that NBC News Meet the Press news summary, not only with the farewell from Chuck Todd at the beginning, it did talk about, when it talked about the future of the political parties, it ended with bad poll numbers for Biden. I mean, if the Republican Party weren't so off the rails and extreme, Biden would be in a lot more trouble for re-election, but he's in pretty big trouble for re-election as it is. Hopefully he'll get a really weak candidate opposing him like Donald Trump, although we saw how that turned out in 2016. It's kind of scary. It's certainly not a fait accompli, but here is the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. Also talking about the 2024 presidential campaign in full swing and ending with bad poll numbers for Biden, which I'll talk about a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. Republican presidential candidates flock to the Iowa versus Iowa State football game this weekend, as there are signs everywhere that the 2024 presidential campaign is already in full swing. And on the Democratic side, this week, President Biden's team launched a $25 million ad campaign. One spot touting the Biden economic record, another dramatically telling the story of the president's trip to Ukraine in February. An ad designed to push back on concerns about Biden's age, showing a man on the move, swiftly making his way into a war zone. But it all feels less like a sprint to Election Day than a campaign running around in circles, playing out a repeat of 2016, when Donald Trump took an early lead and never looked back, and a repeat of 2020, Trump versus Biden all over again. Sure, there's been some movement on the Republican side, DeSantis down, Haley up, but at the moment, Trump standing among Republicans is as dominant as ever. For Democrats this week, a new CNN poll landed with a thud. President Biden's approval rating slipping below 40%. And despite all that talk about Bidenomics, a majority saying Biden's policies have made the economic conditions worse. And then there's this. 2/3 of Democratic-aligned voters say the party should nominate someone else, someone besides Biden, in 2024. This is just the latest indication that a majority of Democrats are looking for an alternative that just doesn't seem to be there. Democratic leaders point to real signs that Biden's policies are working. Inflation is down, unemployment remains historically low, economic growth is strong. But if the news is good, there's no indication that voters are feeling it. We're going to speak with leaders in both parties about all of this, starting with President Biden's key ally in the Senate, Chris Coons of Delaware. So, Senator Coons.
And I don't have a clip of Senator Chris Coons. Instead, I'm going to have Governor Chris Sununu, the other Chris who was on ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos. But you saw both ABC and NBC talked about the bad CNN poll numbers, which is kind of odd because I'm going to show you two CNN news summaries that didn't focus on that. That actually focused on more breaking news. And I think that's one of the flaws of some of the corporate news outlets. They record, I don't know when they record them necessarily. Seems like NBC News Meet the Press has been pre-recorded like days in advance sometimes. I've been criticizing Chuck Todd for sort of phoning it in his last few months, but I don't know, maybe it'll change when Kristen Welker takes over. That ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary from Jonathan Karl didn't really talk much about Biden's foreign trip. You'll see in the CBS News Face the Nation news summary, which is even shorter coming up. They talk about the Moroccan earthquake. They talk about both Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris's foreign trips, and then they segue into talking about Kamala Harris because that is their exclusive guest. I talked about that bias earlier, and I'll talk about this clip a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning, and welcome to Face the Nation. The reports and the pictures coming in from Morocco, where an earthquake hit Friday, are stunning. More than 2,000 are dead, and that number is expected to climb as rescuers desperately try to find survivors in the rubble. The quake is the strongest to hit a North African country in 120 years, and the U.S. Geological Survey put it at a 6.8 magnitude. In other foreign news, President Biden met with leaders of the G20. Those are the 20 largest economies in the world, notably missing Russia's Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping. We'll have more on the president's trip later in the broadcast. Vice President Kamala Harris has also been conferring with allies. We met up with her in Indonesia late last week for the ASEAN Summit, a network of nations in Southeast Asia. While we were there, our polling unit surveyed Americans about the job the vice president is doing back home. Her approval rating tracks similarly to President Biden's at 41%. Republicans have been focusing a lot of their attacks on Harris, highlighting that she would be in line for the job of president should anything happen to President Biden. And it is Republicans who say they have heard a lot about her work, more so than Democrats. Our conversation in Jakarta allowed us the opportunity to ask about her work and a lot more.
And my final clip 12, at the end of the program will be the beginning of Margaret Brennan's interview with Kamala Harris. By the way, if you want to see the entire CBS News Face the Nation program free on YouTube, go to the link down in the video description under sources. It goes to the Face the Nation YouTube channel where by Monday they have the entire program uploaded for free. You can watch it. You can watch the entire interview. I think there's even a longer version of the interview on their YouTube channel. They didn't really talk anywhere in Face the Nation about the threat to the Republican Party of Trump, so I'll have Kamala Harris both talking about why Republicans are attacking her and whether she's taking the threat of a second Trump presidency seriously. That's the final clip. But before I get to that, I have two more news summaries. And I kind of criticized that Face the Nation news summary, but this is where CNN's State of the Union really excels, where they can actually report on news that's breaking because they record the program live, or they actually they don't even record it. They broadcast the program live at 6 a.m. Pacific time, my time, or 9 a.m. Eastern time. And then, like I was saying before, they rebroadcast it 3 hours later. Usually, if they're like being lazy that week, they just rebroadcast the pre-recorded show. But this time they kind of they used a bunch of the interviews over pre-recorded, but you'll see Jake Tapper re-recorded or did a new live news summary because the 6 a.m. version was before Biden's news conference that they were waiting for. You saw in my comedy clip with bated breath, they were waiting for it. And then I guess by the time the second broadcast of CNN State of the Union came around, Jake Tapper's breath was no longer bated and he could report. And within 3 hours, within like an hour or so, they had put in a couple clips and rewritten the news summary with the clips. So here's the first. That's why I wanted to show you. They're both only about a little over a minute long, so it's not wasting a lot of time. But I just wanted you to see how CNN uses their advantage of broadcasting live. And so here's the 6 a.m. version, 6 a.m. Pacific, and then I'll show you the 3 hours later.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is focused on the larger world and foremost the victims of that devastating earthquake in Morocco. We're all waiting to hear from President Biden in Vietnam, his last stop on a whirlwind international trip aimed at strengthening global alliances at a time of high anxiety. The president is going to give a news conference at any moment, and we will bring that to you live. He will surely be asked about his goals at this weekend's G20 summit, which focused on countering China, its splintering economy, and its aggressive posture around the globe, and on Russia's grinding war against the Ukrainian people amid dwindling hopes of a resolution anytime soon. Ukraine is reacting today with frustration to a joint statement from the G20 nations, which include Russia and China, a statement that did not directly condemn Russia's war. A spokesman for the government of Ukraine said that the statement ignored reality and called its written text about the war, quote, nothing to be proud of. Let's get straight to Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley for her.
Oh, and I am going to have a brief clip of Jake Tapper's interview with Nikki Haley, where he talks about one specific issue that the Republican Party is going to be destroyed over, which is being one of their big issues is being the law and order party. You know, how can you be the law and order party when your nominee has 91 felony charges against him? You can see Nikki Haley's answer when I get to clip 10. But first, I want to show you clip 7, the final news summary. This is how Jake Tapper and the producers at CNN State of the Union were able to, within about 90 minutes of Biden's news conference, update their news summary at the beginning of the program to include clips of Biden and summaries of what he said that I will talk about a little more after we watch that final news summary together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is focused overseas, particularly on the rescue workers currently searching for survivors after that horrific earthquake in Morocco. This morning, President Biden is in Hanoi, Vietnam, laying out his China policy on the second leg of his international trip aimed at shoring up support among U.S. allies. In a news conference just minutes ago, Biden walked a line by insisting that he does not want to contain China, but rather wants China to succeed, playing, quote, by the rules.
We're not looking to hurt China, sincerely. We're all better off if China does well. China does well by the international rules.
Biden also found himself defending the G20 committee members' joint statement on Ukraine, which did not directly condemn Russia's war. Ukraine is reacting, frankly, with frustration, calling it, quote, nothing to be proud of, after G20 members Russia and China had resisted stronger language in that final statement. Let's get straight to Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley.
So, yeah, I think that was a good job from CNN State of the Union updating their news summary. And I will have a clip of that Nikki Haley interview talking about the Republicans being the law and order party, like I was saying. But now I'm going to get to all of the newsmaker clips. I'm going to show you Bill Cassidy being interviewed by Chuck Todd, then Chris Sununu being interviewed by Jonathan Karl, then Jake Tapper talking to Nikki Haley. And this Bill Cassidy clip, this is Chuck Todd's like swan song as an interviewer. You'll see Bill Cassidy even calls him on like every time, you know, you haven't broken your streak because you keep asking me like, how can I vote for Trump as the head of the Republican Party? But or if he ends up being the nominee for the 2024 presidential election, Bill Cassidy kind of answers, well, says he might write someone in, but he also talks about the difference between traditional Republican conservatism and Trump populism, which I think if they're going to, if the traditional conservative Republicans are going to win back the party, they have to spend a lot more time talking about that, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch this final Chuck Todd, host of NBC News Meet the Press clip together over here.
Let's talk about the future of the party. You had been adamant for the last 2 years. When you asked the Trump question, you're like, he's not going to be the nominee. He's not going to be the nominee. Can you feel that comfortable declaring that now?
Well, I'll say that I've not been quite so adamant recently.
Okay.
So he might be the nominee. And I think Mike Pence is trying to draw the contrast. Is there a populist future to our country, to our party, to the Republican Party, or is there a non-populist? Populism has a role, but I think now the populism has come to the point where if you look at a poll of the American people, most don't like it.
You come from a state where populism led to corruption pretty quickly.
That's true.
In its history. When I think of Huey Long, Edwin Edwards, you can go through the line. Populism goes to corruption fast.
But think about the purpose of populism. When the elites come up with a policy set, which is separate and different from that which the people actually feel meets their needs, that has to be addressed. And so there is a role for that sensitivity to what the people want. I am totally in favor of that. What I don't like is when you tell people just what they want to hear, even if it's not true.
Right.
You know I've been very focused on Social Security.
I know, yeah.
We've got two candidates who are telling the American people that which they wish to hear, not that which is true. Because of that, Social Security, if it goes insolvent, as it's predicted to, will result in a 24% cut in benefits for those receiving. So for a candidate to tell the American people there's no problem, that's populism going awry.
In February of 2021, you decided that Donald Trump was unfit to ever hold federal office again. Your vote for convict said that as much. You've answered this question very carefully in the past, which you said you plan to support a Republican. If he is the nominee, can you vote for him? I know where you are on Biden. Can you vote for Trump?
You know, we're keeping our streak alive. Every time we've met, you've asked me about this.
I understand that. Well, it's, I don't know why isn't it an easy answer?
Well, because I'm going to vote for a Republican. Yes, I am.
But you might have to write it in?
Might have to write it in.
What about this?
And then Chuck Todd goes on to ask Bill Cassidy about the No Labels party, like if he could vote for a third party. But that is the final Chuck Todd clip as moderator of NBC News' Meet the Press I'm going to show you. He didn't really get good answers out of Bill Cassidy. I mean, he did bring up Huey Long and Louisiana populism to sort of get that differentiation between populist Republicans and conservative Republicans. That might be one good thing I could say about Chuck Todd as he's leaving. And one other good thing I can say about Chuck Todd is, you know, last week I criticized his cross-examination of New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who has this whole scenario laid out where there are going to be fewer candidates versus Trump in Iowa, and then even fewer in his primary in New Hampshire. And then by the time they get to Super Tuesday, maybe it's going to be one-on-one, which that seems a little optimistic because that's what, March 9th, I think. But that's like I was saying, the next 6 months are going to decide whether Trump's going to destroy the Republican Party. But anyway, the good news for Chuck Todd is Chris Sununu was over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And I don't think Jonathan Karl did any better of a job of cross-examining this scenario. I mean, Donald Trump is leading in a lot of Super Tuesday states now. Like California is a Super Tuesday state. South Carolina is before Super Tuesday, I think. But I mean, if Trump like wins the first 2 or 3 primaries and comes into Super Tuesday as like the favorite, is he really going to lose to some other 1 or 2 candidates? Like I said, I think it might be a little bit optimistic to say it's going to be Trump versus one other candidate by Super Tuesday. It might be 1, 2, or 3. And anyway, let's hear Chris Sununu make his argument about how Trump's going to be in trouble when it comes to Super Tuesday, not really get any cross-examination from Jonathan Karl any better than Chuck Todd did last week. I think this is kind of a way too optimistic scenario for the Republican Party, but you know, Chris Sununu, the governor of New Hampshire, he knows a lot about Republican politics, but maybe more than I do. So let me know if you think his description of this scenario is realistic, or do I think he's kind of pie in the sky here? Let me know what you think after we watch that clip together over here.
Governor Sununu, I want to ask you about the news this weekend. We saw former President Trump was just endorsed by South Dakota's Republican Governor Kristi Noem. By my count, he's now up to, I think, 4 Republican endorsements. Do you anticipate more Republican governors getting online, getting on board with Trump? I mean, you know Republican governors.
Well,
you are one.
I do. Look, my sense is there's a lot of governors kind of sitting on the sidelines saying, how does this all play out? Just like most of the Republican bases. Like, there's a lot of time to go. We've only had 1 debate. We're just starting to talk about the issues. The candidates are really on the ground. The fact that former President Trump is a former president, the leader of the party, and he doesn't even really have 50% of the Republican base support, tells you there's a real problem there. That's actually an incredibly low number. So you have all these other candidates out there, 7, 8 of them at this point. That field's going to keep winnowing down, I think, as we've talked about a lot. If it gets to one-on-one, Trump and another candidate, that other candidate is undoubtedly going to beat him by the time the convention rolls around. So if the candidates have the discipline to narrow the field, they'll get there. As in terms of endorsements, look, again, if he's a former sitting incumbent president and the leader of the party, and he only has 4 Republican governors behind him, that tells you there's a problem.
Well, and my sense is, talking to Republican governors, is a lot of them who have not endorsed anybody have real qualms about Donald Trump. You aren't afraid to express those. But is it time for Republican governors who do have concerns to get out there and to get behind somebody else? I mean, it's going to be too late pretty soon, isn't it?
Everyone. No, it won't be too late. I think it's important that everyone has a voice. I mean, and people can modulate and decide what that voice is going to be. Every state's a little bit different. But everyone needs to be talking about where they stand, what issues their constituents are talking about. It's inflation. It's the border crisis. It's a lack of financial controls. It's all these things that were actually good ideas by the former president. He brought those ideas in 16, 17, and 18, and it didn't get done. It didn't get done. So we just need to find the conservative leader that can fulfill on the mission. That's all. And there's a lot of great opportunities in the field now. So, I mean, voters really won't decide until who they're going to be voting for until maybe November, December timeframe. I mean, look, kids are getting back to school. We've all come off summer vacation. You and I are in this mix almost every single day, but the average voter isn't. They'll really start getting engaged as the October, November timeframe comes. And I think if you can get down to about 6 candidates by Iowa, 3 or 4 by New Hampshire, there's no doubt you'll have a one-on-one race going into Super Tuesday, and that's where the former President Trump is really in trouble.
And you have real leverage in New Hampshire, it seems to me. Are you're going to be making an endorsement before the primary?
I would think so. Yeah. I fully look. I'm not very good about being coy. You know.
So who's on your?
I figure out who I'm voting for. I'll let everybody know.
So who's on your short list? Who are you looking at?
Well, I wouldn't say there's a short list. I'm out there with all the candidates. I'm seeing kind of how they do the retail politics. I'm a big believer, good retail politics translate into good retail management. And that's what the White House needs, someone that understands what's happening in folks' everyday lives as opposed to just watching the media all the time, right? I mean, I got to tell you, when you're at these events, if you've been able to go to any of them, John, they're not asking about January 6th. People aren't asking questions about the indictments. They're asking about inflation. They're asking about border security. They're asking about things and issues, mental health, the opioid crisis. You know, I'm blessed. I'm in New Hampshire. We have the lowest poverty rate in the country. But people here are seeing the crisis in California. They're saying, what are you going to do about the mental health crisis, the homelessness crisis that the left-wing agenda has completely, ignored in places like California, because they're Americans too. So we kind of look at the whole broad spectrum of what's happening across the country. Those are the questions that are being asked. I know the media just talks about January 6th and indictments, but let me tell you, the average voter isn't there right now. They're really looking at the issues that will impact them and their families.
You see momentum with Nikki Haley?
And then Jonathan Karl follows up with the question about Nikki Haley not really following up on Governor Chris Sununu's scenario being too optimistic about the number of candidates who will be staying in the race through Super Tuesday, and also the problems with Trump having a huge lead in so many Super Tuesday states and South Carolina. If he wins Iowa, if Trump wins Iowa and wins New Hampshire, who's going to then be in a position to challenge him in South Carolina and Super Tuesday, where he already has huge leads? That's I said this last week when Chuck Todd didn't follow up. I don't think Jonathan Karl did that great a job. But I don't know, maybe, like I said before I showed the clip, Chris Sununu knows a lot about Republican presidential politics. He's the governor of New Hampshire, which is the first primary state. Do you think his scenario is wishful thinking, or is there some chance that someone is going to successfully challenge Trump for the Republican nomination? Maybe Nikki Haley? I don't know. Well, you can let me know what you think. But my next clip is actually a brief question and answer from Jake Tapper talking to Nikki Haley. This was really the only question that fit my topic, even though CNN State of the Union was 2 hours long. They mostly talked about foreign policy and Biden's trip to the G20 and to Vietnam. They had Republican Michael McCall on, but never asked him any questions about Trump destroying the Republican Party. But here is Jake Tapper asking a very legitimate question to Nikki Haley, where, the Republican Party has been the law and order party, but now they're going to nominate someone who has 91 felony counts against him. And there are some people in the Republican Party defund the FBI. That's very close to defund the police. Jake Tapper doesn't really follow up on it, but at least he asked Nikki Haley the question that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Can the Republican Party credibly claim to be a law and order party with a nominee who is facing 91 felony counts?
Well, Jake, I'll tell you this. I was at the United Nations, and I saw many countries who would say someone was a criminal before they were tried. This is America. We don't do that. You're not convicted until you've had the opportunity to defend yourself. So let's let Donald Trump defend himself. Let's see what happens. And if he is convicted, then the American people will deal with it then. But let's have the blessings that we have in America, which is everybody's innocent until proven guilty. Let's let the evidence play out. Let's let the lawyers do their thing, and let's see what Donald Trump does, and then we can make a decision. But I have faith in the American people. I trust them, and I trust what will happen will be the right thing for our country.
And like I said, Jake Tapper didn't follow up, but the logical follow-up would be, well, what if he's convicted? Would it be a problem for the Law and Order Party to nominate someone who's convicted of felonies? But he didn't ask that question. That was the one question that Jake Tapper asked that fit my topic, so that's why I showed that clip, although I've shown multiple Jake Tapper clips earlier and talked about them. But the next two clips don't really fit the topic either, because neither Fox News Sunday nor CBS News's Face the Nation talked to any Republicans about how Trump was destroying the Republican Party. These are sort of tangentially related to my topic instead. The first clip here is Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin on Fox News Sunday with Shannon Bream, where nowhere in the program did they talk about the problems with Trump and how he's destroying the Republican Party, except in this one question to Glenn Youngkin. They talked about a Wall Street Journal editorial that said Republicans were pining for Glenn Youngkin, the much more attractive, untarnished candidate, to get into the race. He said he won't look at running for president till after the November 2023 elections in Virginia. He's up for re-election in just a couple months, which is why he hasn't declared for president. But I think there is actually a good chance that this dude you're about to see, Glenn Youngkin, is going to declare and take on Donald Trump. And it's not just a possible thing that I'm talking about. It's something that Republicans are pining for. Pining. I couldn't help but notice the word pining. I think Fox News is pining for another candidate because they're just hoping that the Republican Party isn't destroyed, because they're the propaganda outlet for the Republican Party. And I think that's the subtext of this clip. And Shannon Bream is such a Glenn Youngkin sycophant. You'll see at the very end of this clip where she's totally agrees with everything he's saying. But here's Glenn Youngkin, who may be challenging Donald Trump in a last-minute entry. I think that might actually, after he wins his re-election as governor of Virginia in November, and he can't run after that. He's term limited after that. So what else is he going to do? I think it's actually quite a likely scenario, and you'll see even Shannon Bream notices he leaves a crack open. Well, more than a crack. He never says no, he's not running, over in this clip.
You've talked a lot about Virginia's fall elections. Everybody's up for re-election in the state assembly, and you said that's your focus for now. But the Wall Street Journal notes this: if the November 7th elections go well for his party, Youngkin could make a late entry into the 2024 presidential race, a prospect he hasn't ruled out and some national Republicans have pined for. I want to play a little bit of an ad that your PAC had up earlier this year, too.
We can usher in a new era of American values.
Looks a lot like a campaign ad, but you can't run again for governor in Virginia. What are you thinking about 2024? Are you definitively ruling it in or out?
Well, Shannon, I've been really clear. I am so focused on 2023. It's the most important election in the nation, in my view. We have a chance to demonstrate that common sense conservative policies can in fact result in great outcomes. And when I look at what's happened in Virginia over the last 19 months since we had the great privilege of being hired, I am so encouraged because we have all of a sudden gone from near the bottom of job growth to near the top in job growth. We've seen the largest workforce in Virginia's history, more Virginians working than ever. We've reduced taxes. We've backed law enforcement. We've reestablished expectations of excellence in school and empowered parents. And what gets me most excited is that, yes, people around the country are noticing and they think it's good. I'm most focused on Virginians thinking that it's good, and that's what we're focused on this fall.
That sounds like a stump speech.
Well, I don't think it sounds like a stump speech. I think it sounds like the truth. And the reality is that we have, in fact, brought a whole new way of governing to Virginia, a way of governing that reflects work and results and reflects conservative common sense values. And we have made great change in a very short period of time.
Okay, any way you would take those skills to running in 2024 for the presidency?
Well, as I've said, I'm not in Iowa at the state fair. I was actually at the Rockingham County Fair, and yesterday I was supporting one of our delegates outside Petersburg. I'm campaigning in Virginia for Virginians, not around the country.
Okay, I will leave that as the door. Still seems like maybe there's a little crack open there. Governor, thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Thank you for covering education. There's nothing more important in our nation than making sure that these future generations are receiving the quality education they deserve to lead and to face the challenges that we will all know they will.
We got to do it for our kids.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We got to do it for our kids. That is a very confrontational cross-examination from Shannon Bream for that final comment from Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. And I think I misspoke before I showed that clip, by the way, that Virginia governors are limited to one term, or at least they can't run in consecutive terms. I was looking at it during the clip. So Glenn Youngkin isn't running for re-election this year. But the Virginia legislature has elections in 2 months. And once that's done, based on that last clip, it looks like he may very well run for the Republican nomination for president. He certainly didn't rule it out, left, I think, more than a crack open. And otherwise, I think I successfully pre-criticized that clip before I showed it in terms of Shannon Bream's sycophantic questioning. Fox News, and especially Shannon Bream, is quite the partisan hack when it comes to Fox News Sunday host. This was her 1 year anniversary hosting, and nothing she's done in the last year has changed my judgment that she is basically a Republican partisan hack sitting. But Fox News Sunday started with Tony Snow and as the moderator, and he was also a partisan hack. So she's upholding a long tradition of partisan hacks hosting Fox News Sunday. And finally, I have one more clip I want to show you. This is from CBS News' Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan's interview with Kamala Harris. And I mentioned earlier that the Face the Nation program didn't really ask anyone any questions about Trump destroying the Republican Party. So the closest I have from Face the Nation of a clip that fits my topic is here, where Kamala Harris is first talking about the problems that the Democratic Party is having with Biden being so old, and Republicans attacking Kamala Harris and her performance, and is she really ready to take over for Biden? And then at the very end of this clip, there's the only question you see about the possibility of a Trump win in 2024, where Margaret Brennan asked Kamala Harris, are you taking the threat of a Trump presidency seriously? And she doesn't even understand the question, which is a little disturbing. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that final Newsmaker clip together over here.
So you're 58 now. If you win a second term, as you and the president are running to do, he would be 86 at the end of it. And we are seeing Republican candidates hone in on you in particular as being next up for that job. Nikki Haley says,
a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for President Kamala Harris.
Chris Christie.
I want to be clear that I pray every night for Joe Biden's good health. Not only because he's our president, but because of who our vice president is.
Ron DeSantis.
Harris is his impeachment insurance. People know if she were president, Katie barred the door. As bad as Biden did, it would get worse.
How do you respond to all of that?
We are delivering for the American people. And the reality of it is that, unfortunately, very few of those who would challenge our administration actually have a plan for America. You look at what we have accomplished, Margaret. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs in America, 13 million new jobs, unemployment at record lows. We have capped the cost of insulin for seniors at $35 a month, capped the cost of prescription drugs on an annual basis at $2,000.
They're talking
for
about
seniors.
What you would do as president as being a risk. They're honing in on you. Why do you think that is? How do you respond to those attacks? That's not about policy, that's about you.
Listen, this is not new. There's nothing new about that. I mean, listen, in my career, I was a career prosecutor. I was the first woman elected district attorney of San Francisco, a major city in this country, and reelected. I was the first woman attorney general of the second largest Department of Justice in the United States and reelected. I was a United States Senator. I represented 1 in 8 Americans, and I'm now Vice President of the United States. They feel the need to attack because they're scared that we will win based on the merit of the work that Joe Biden and I and our administration has done.
But even Democrats are worried about the president's age. The Wall Street Journal had a poll showing 2/3 of Democrats say Joe Biden is too old to run again. Are you prepared to be commander-in-chief?
Yes, I am, if necessary. But Joe Biden is going to be fine. And let me tell you something. I work with Joe Biden every day. Under Joe Biden's leadership, we have transformed and are in the process of transforming America's infrastructure with an historic investment in not only roads and bridges, but high-speed internet, what we are doing around issues like lead pipes, and I could go on and on.
Are you taking the threat of a second Trump presidency seriously enough?
I don't understand the question.
You were dismissive of some of the Republican criticism of you and the president. When you look at current polling, the front runner for a Republican nomination is the former president, the 45th president.
We will win re-election.
We will win
re-election. There is too much at stake, and the American people know it.
So my longtime viewers know I've never been a big fan of Kamala Harris. I'm a longtime ACLU activist here in California, and her record as district attorney in San Francisco, and especially as attorney general in California, was not a very progressive record. She was way too pro-cop. She was anti-criminal justice reform. I mean, that's why I am not a big fan of Kamala Harris, is because I don't think she's really progressive or leftist enough. I know that's not what they think about on Fox News, and that's not what those Republicans are saying. But given all of my qualms about Kamala Harris as in terms of the policies and her political persuasion, she would be so much preferable as a president to Donald Trump or pretty much anyone who I saw on the stage at the Republican debate, that I don't know why it is that so many Republican candidates are so scared of Kamala Harris becoming president. I mean, I don't like her. I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden either. Neither of them were my preferred candidates, but the attacks on them are also really unjustified, in my opinion. Anyway, I thought that was some good questioning by Margaret Brennan of Kamala Harris on those issues. I don't know why Face the Nation didn't really do anything to talk about Trump destroying the Republican Party, which is my main topic. So that would be my one criticism of the Face the Nation program on Sunday. But anyway, those are all the clips I picked out for you from the big five corporate outlets. I hope you appreciate the time and effort I put into watching those programs, picking out the clips, picking the topic, adding my media criticism and political commentary. I'm going to be doing this every Monday all the way through January 2025 when we find out on, I guess, January 6, 2025, who actually is going to become president, since in January 6, 2021, we learned that that's the day when it all actually happens, maybe. Hopefully it won't be like January 6, 2021 on January 6, 2025, but that's why I've committed to keep covering the presidential election season all the way through the end of it in January 2025. I'll be doing this Monday Media Mix-Up every Monday all the way through there, and if you like what I'm doing, right under the video there are links where you can become a monthly patron on Patreon to support my program financially, or give a one-time contribution through PayPal. I appreciate all that support. I appreciate the people who show up for my live streams and contribute your live comments to keep me company while I'm doing the program. Also, the recorded show viewers who comment on the recorded show when it shows up sometime Tuesday morning. I appreciate all of that. Sometimes I find a reason to upload a video in between the Mondays. I actually did that last Friday and got like almost a couple thousand views on my political comedy clip from last Monday about Fox News endorsing socialism and communism. I hope you all saw that. If you haven't seen it, go over to youtube.com/liberalviewer and watch as many of my videos as you like, because that helps support the channel as well. And anyway, I'll be back next Monday and every Monday through January 2025. I appreciate all of you who are watching, and until next Monday, or until, oh, thank you, Lulu Girl, for the super chat contribution there. We're getting almost all cleaned up in the house, by the way, to clean the carpets and maybe adopt a new kitten. You didn't even ask, Lulu Girl, but I know that you're thinking about, when is there going to be a new kitten? Well, it could be very, very soon. I know I promised, or I never promised, but I said it might happen earlier. We're working, and I think there might be a new kitten sometime in 2023 during the whole Monday Media Mix-Up final year. So thank you for that contribution, Lulu Girl, and thank you for all of you who are watching the program live or the recorded version. Until next Monday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.